You ever pick up your guitar, look at your hands and think to yourself, what am I supposed to do today with this thing? You know a handful of chords probably, but it's hard to know where to start or what to play that actually sounds good together. Well, today I want to show you how to take the chords you already know and turn them into something musical, something that makes you want to pick up your guitar and play. Now, all you're going to need is your guitar, a pen and some paper. And by the end of this beginner guitar tutorial, you'll have something musical written down that sounds great. And not only that, but you're going to understand why it works. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do with all your chords is group them together. Now, let's say you've learned a few chords. I'm going to give them to you in alphabetical order, right? So let's say you've learned A minor, B minor, C major, D major, D minor, E major, E minor, F major, and G major. Some very typical beginner guitar chords there. Now, we can actually sort these into two main groups, and here's the first group. So this is C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major and A minor. And here's our second group. We've got G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major and E minor. Now, I just want to make it clear that I didn't make these groups up. This isn't my personal system or anything. This is just how music works. Now, these chords belong together because they come from the same pool of notes. They come from the same family, what musicians call a key. And you'll see this everywhere in songs across all styles of music. You'll often hear musicians say things like, this song is in the key of C, or this one's in G major. Maybe not quite in that accent. But all that really means is that those songs are going to mostly use chords from that group. Now, each chord in these groups also has a number, and this will come in handy as you'll see later on in this video. So for example, in the key of G, we have G major, that's chord number 1. We have A minor, chord 2, B minor, chord 3, C major, chord 4, D major, chord 5, and E minor, chord 6. In the key of C major, we have C major is chord 1, D minor is chord 2, E minor is chord 3, F major, chord 4, G major, chord 5, and A minor is chord 6. Now, you might have noticed that I haven't mentioned E major, and the thing is, E major isn't in either of those groups. But hold that thought, because in the next part, we'll come back to it and I'll show you why E major doesn't quite fit. So now you know which chords belong together. The next question is, what can you do with that knowledge? So let's see how to use those chords to make something that sounds like real music. First, what you're going to want to do is pick one of those groups, one of those keys. And we're going to use G major because I love G major. And as I said before, G major has the G major chord, A minor chord, B minor chord, C major chord, D major chord, and E minor. Now that we know which chords go together, we can start creating some chord progressions. And chord progressions are simply sequences of chords you can use to work on your chord changes, for example. So this will help you in your practice. But they're also good if it's also a bit of a starting point if you want to start writing your own songs. But that's another completely different video. Now, it's these chord progressions which are what makes songs work. And they're a bit that they're the bit that gives music its movement. You know, because every song you know is built on one or more chord progressions. You know, sometimes songs just use one chord progression all the way through. Others have a few different chord progressions for different parts of the song, the verse, the chorus, etc. So what I want to do now is build a chord progression together. And we're going to stay in the key of G major, and we're going to start with the chord G major. That's going to be our home chord, and you'll feel why in a minute. Okay, so this is where we need a bit of paper and a bit of pen. We can put the plectrum down, and we are going to make a short 4-bar chord progression in 4/4 time. You know, and that is where there are 4 beats in each bar. And for this practice, all you need to do is just play 4 steady down strums. So it's just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. On paper, it's going to look like this, right? So we're going to draw our bar lines, okay? And it's going to look like this. So each of these here is a bar. Bar 1, bar 2, bar 3, bar 4, okay? And as I said, each bar will have 4 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put G major as the first chord and the last chord. All right. So we're going to have G. So it's going to have G, 2, 3, 4. And those lines there are the strum lines. The G is the first strum in the chord, in the bar. So G, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And then we have, as I said, G, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've got 4 bars. First bar G, last bar is G. Now we see these 2 bars in the middle here. Well, you can fill them with any chords from the key of G major and they'll sound musical. So let's try a few examples. So for the first chord progression, what we're going to do is we're going to put C and D in the middle here. So we're going to play C, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4. So this is our 4-bar chord progression. Simple chords, G for 1 bar, C for 1 bar, D for 1 bar, and G for 1 bar. Have a listen to this. So we're just going 1, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. C, 2, 3, 4. D, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now we also have 2 more chord progressions, right? The second chord progression is G for a bar, A minor, C, and G. And then we have G, E minor, C, G. Now, as I said, all of these are chords from the key of G major. Now have a listen to how they sound, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. A minor, 2, 3, 4. C, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. Here's the third example. 1, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. E minor, 2, 3, 4. C, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. And, you know, you hear how starting and ending on that G major chord, chord number 1, makes it feel finished, okay? Like we've come home, right? And that's the power of the home chord. Now, I mentioned E major earlier, remember that? Now, watch what happens if I throw G major into the mix instead of one of those chords. I'm going to play one of those chord progressions, see if you can spot the E major. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay, so you hear how it clashes a little bit there, right? Like it doesn't belong. And it was the third chord in that 4-chord sequence. And that's because E major isn't part of the key of G major. It's not part of the family of G major chords. Now, it's not wrong, but it just doesn't really belong here. Now, sticking with the chords that fit together will make everything sound musical when you're practicing. Now, let's do the same thing with the other group, the other key, and that is C major. And we've built same patterns here. Okay, we've got 3 examples. We've got C, F, G, C. Then example 2 is C, D minor, F, C. Then we've got C, A minor, F, C. Now, don't be afraid of that F major chord. This is why you're here to practice as well. So have a listen to these 3 chord progressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. C, F, G, C. Here's the second one. 1, 2, 3, 4. C, D minor, F, C. And the last one, C, 2, 3, 4, A minor, 2, 3, 4, F, 2, 3, 4, C, 2, 3, 4. Now, I hope you noticed how these 3 chord progressions sound very similar to the first 3 chord progressions, even though the chords are actually different. And that's because we've kept the same shape of the chord progression, just in another key. Now keep that in mind, because once you can do this in one key, you can do it in any key. Okay, so now we've built a few chord progressions together and played them in different keys. Let's take that a little further. And I want to show you something really useful. How you can move those same progressions to another key and start to hear how they still sound familiar. Now remember earlier when I said that each chord has a number. So G major was 1, A minor was 2, B minor was 3, C was 4, D 5, E minor 6. Well, this is where that idea really starts to make a bit more sense. So let's start with this chord progression, right? We did this chord progression here. We did G, C, D, and G. Remember that chord progression, right? It's got a kind of a sense of movement, you know, away from home and back again. But it still fits with the chords inside the key of G major. Now, if we look at the chords in the key of C major, especially with that first chord progression, right? There's the G, G, C, D, G. Now we have C, F, G, C. Again, starting with the home chord, C, and finishing with the C with a couple of chords in the key of C major in between. Now, when you play through those 2 chord progressions, you know, you'll notice that it still has the same feeling of going somewhere and coming home, even though the chords have changed. Now, and remember the chord numbers we talked about earlier. So in the key of G, right, this, whoops, let's take that lid off. This was chord number 1. This was chord number 4. And this one, chord number 5. And this one, chord number 1. Okay. Now, if we look over to the chords in C, this one is number 1. This one is number 4. This one is number 5. And that last one, number 1 again. And that's why both of those chord progressions sound so alike. You know, your ear is recognizing the same musical shape, just starting from different home chords. You see, and once you understand that, you can use the same pattern in other keys too. But let's stick to the two keys we've been looking at so far. We've been looking at G major and C major. Okay, have a look at this. Now, just from the numbers of the chords, what do you think? What is the key of this? A little test for you. Well, as you can see, there is chord number 1, so we are in the key of G. But we've changed the order around a little bit here, something different. And this, I'd say, is in the key of G major. Now, how would I write that if I wanted to play the same progression in the key of C major? So this is what we're going to do. So we need chord 6, we need chord 4, we need chord 1 and chord 5. So we know that chord 1 is going to be C, strum, strum, strum. And what is chord 6? Well, chord 6 is A minor. A minor, 2, 3, 4. Chord 4 is F, 2, 3, 4. And chord 5 is G, 2, 3, 4. Now we have exactly the same pattern, but in different keys. Key of G, key of C. Now, let's play these, right? And have a listen to how they sound. Okay, even close your eyes. Close your eyes and just listen. And can you tell that both tell the same little musical story? Okay, here it is in the key of G. I'm going to go around it a couple of times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again. Right, here is the second one in the key of C. A minor, F, C and G. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe the first thing you notice is that it doesn't feel complete because we're not going back to the home chord. But secondly, I think maybe more importantly, is that those two chord progressions, they sound the same. Not using the same chords, but they have that same feeling, okay? And the more you experiment like this, the more you'll begin to hear what's happening in the songs you love. Because the more you practice this kind of practice, of writing your own chord progressions and changing them into different keys, that's when you start to recognize patterns in chord changes. And then you'll be able to hear one of your favorite songs and think, hey, hang on a sec, that sounds like E minor going to C and then going to G. You know, you might not have the right key, but you might have the idea of it's a 6, 4, 1, 5 chord progression. And that, for me, is one of the best feelings you can get when you're learning the guitar, starting to recognize chord changes. So keep a pen and paper out and start writing your own chord progressions and change them into different keys. Now, maybe you don't know all of those chords, but you can still group them together. Okay, you can still group what you know in the chords in the key of C and still group the chords in the key of G. Put them together. So now you've heard how these chords can sound musical in more than one key. The next step is to really kind of try it out in a real song style. Now, remember when I said earlier that you can do this in any key? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to show you in this next lesson right here. It's a little bit of blues, and it's the perfect way to hear these patterns in action and get even better at recognizing chord changes. Thanks for joining me today. Happy strumming.